Tonight on Currents News, a presidential first and a moment pro-life supporters have been waiting for nearly 50 years.
For the first time ever, the commander-in-chief will join tens of thousands right here on the National Mall for the fired-up March for Life. I'm Emily Druby, and the excitement is building here in D.C.
And another history-making moment today, a new shepherd for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, their first Hispanic archbishop. 20 million people are being quarantined in China, and Beijing has nixed plans for the most festive day on the calendar, with no cure in sight for a mysterious illness. Plus, the second installment of a special Currents news series, Human Trafficking Exposed. We dig deep into a crisis that Pope Francis calls modern-day slavery, the silent epidemic right here in New York and around the globe. A busy day of news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Lydia Serrani. Tonight we begin with history about to be made. Donald Trump is set to become the first sitting president ever to attend the March for Life. The giant rally in support of the unborn kicks off in Washington tomorrow. Currents News' Emily Druby is there now with the very latest. Emily?
Lydia, thousands of pro-life marchers are already here in Washington, and they're fired up over the president's decision to attend. Many especially thrilled considering this year we saw so many pro-life laws passed.
In this culture today, everything is so messed up that we really need a lot of people to stand up and be here and to show that it's important, you know, that God's important, that life is important.
Hope filled the eyes of Mickey MAHOWALD and her daughter PETRA as they arrived in Washington, D.C. for the March for Life.
I feel like it's really important because people need to know that young people care as well.
A hope shared by pro-life supporters of all ages. On Friday, over 100,000 will march, calling for an end to abortion. They'll be joined by President Donald Trump, who will be the first president in U.S. history to attend the event.
We know that every life has meaning.
Last year, in this video message, he addressed the March for Life just as he did the year before. Many here are thankful for his support.
God bless him! Finally, we have someone in place who truly recognizes the importance of this issue and has taken wonderful steps to save lives.
In 2019, 58 abortion laws were passed in U.S. states. 25 of them banned the procedure to some extent. Pro-lifers are hoping to continue this streak in 2020, and the Supreme Court already has one abortion case on its docket.
It gives hope for this movement moving forward, and just the fact that even more and more people every year seem to become aware of this.
The amount of abortions in the U.S. has already fallen to the lowest levels that we have seen since the Roe v. Wade decision. But still, so many people I spoke with here today say that they will not stop until it is illegal everywhere. In Washington, D.C., Emily Druby, Currents News.
Thank you so much, Emily. Net TV is New York's Catholic station and will televise the March for Life live. Tune in right here starting at noon tomorrow for complete coverage of the giant rally, including President Trump's appearance. And a new poll out tonight shows an overwhelming number of Americans want major restrictions on abortion. A Marist College survey found 70% of the country is against late-term abortions. At the same time, 3 out of 4 Americans, 77%, want the Supreme Court to uphold Roe v. Wade. According to the poll, 40% of respondents said they were pro-life and 55% identified as abortion supporters. The survey was sponsored by the Knights of Columbus. Philadelphia Archbishop Charles Chaput is one of the top voices for the unborn in America, but now he is stepping down. Pope Francis accepted his resignation today and named a new leader for the Archdiocese. Currents News' Tim Harfman has that story.
Philadelphia has a new Catholic leader, Bishop Nelson Perez.
In a very real sense, in a very practical sense, I'm home.
The now Archbishop-elect was ordained a priest of Philadelphia in 1989, serving parishes and in Hispanic ministry. Born to Cuban parents, the 58-year-old raising up the voice of all immigrants.
We have to respect the dignity of the human person that has been given to every single one of us by God.
Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop OCTAVIO CISNEROS has known Perez since the Archbishop-elect was studying for the priesthood. CISNEROS says this is a major moment for the U.S. Church.
This means a lot. The Church and the Holy Father actually has recognized the presence of Hispanics and the ministry that is being carried out in this part of the world.
Perez replaces Archbishop Charles Chaput, who's retiring at the church's mandatory age of 75. The Archbishop-elect is a former auxiliary bishop of Rockville Center, and in 2017 was assigned to the Cleveland Diocese. He has hope for the future of the 1.2 million Catholics in Philadelphia.
Never underestimate the power of the Holy Spirit working in you, through you, and despite you.
Perez will be installed during a special Mass on February 18th. Tim Harfman, Currents News.
A Catholic family is back together tonight in Los Angeles after an emotional reunion at LAX airport. And that hug right there, that was a year and a half in the making. Fernando Arredondo, his wife and kids fled gang violence in Guatemala in 2018. All of them, except for Fernando, passed initial screenings for asylum. He was deported even though a federal judge had ordered them to all stay together. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles is now taking steps to support the family. The Supreme Court seems poised to make it easier for tax dollars to go to religious schools. Court watchers are saying the conservative majority appeared ready to end a ban on state aid to faith-based classrooms in Montana. A decision favorable to religious education could impact Catholic schools right here in the Brooklyn Diocese, which has long supported state tax credits for scholarship donors. And over on Capitol Hill, House prosecutors pressing their impeachment case against President Trump for the second day. Their opening arguments are expected to run through tomorrow, and then the Trump legal team will have its say. The president is facing charges of abuse of power and obstructing Congress. Tonight, China is calling it a state of war, and they're taking drastic steps to contain that outbreak of a mysterious virus. 3 big Chinese cities with a population larger than New York are now on lockdown. In an unprecedented move, authorities in China have banned public travel in 3 cities there, affecting about 20 million people, all in an effort to contain the deadly coronavirus.
Actually, I'm worried about every place with so many people. Yeah, because I think this disease is more serious than SARS in 2003.
The coronavirus is a cousin to the SARS virus, which infected thousands and killed hundreds in Asia in 2002 and 2003. Doctors say when it comes to fighting the disease, the United States is ahead of the game.
We know the situation is evolving. We have screening that's been put into place. So as opposed to where we were 15 years ago, we're very much more ahead of the game now than we were then.
With 1 confirmed case in Washington state, health officials fear air travel will help spread the disease during this busy China New Year travel season. Several major airports, including New York's JFK, are screening passengers coming from China.
They just had a little sign that said, if you're coming from Wuhan, let us know. If you have a fever, let us know.
The deadly pneumonia-like virus has already killed at least 18 people, sickened more than 600, and spread to 8 countries around the world. Health officials are warning all international travelers to be on guard, especially those in China.
We're taking precautions, wearing masks, making sure to wash your hands properly.
Scientists in China are saying that snakes may be the original source of the outbreak, and Beijing has nixed plans for all large-scale Lunar New Year festivities because of the virus as well. Stay right here for the latest installment of a Currents News special series, Human Trafficking Exposed.
Trafficking doesn't always look like black eyes and violence. It's often psychological manipulation and control.
That's Queens prosecutor Jessica Melton, and she says silence is fueling the epidemic. Up next, you'll hear from courageous survivors. Tonight we continue our special series on human trafficking, an underreported crime that disproportionately affects women and young girls. Senior reporter Tamara Lane joins us now with part 2 of her special report. Tamara, I watched your story earlier. It was emotional, it was powerful, and I really felt for these women.
They're some of the bravest women I've ever met. All too often, survivors of human trafficking are silenced, stigmatized with labels like victim and prostitute. But no more. Tonight, brave survivors and their families are speaking out about the challenges they have overcome. It's a mother-daughter story of survival.
A visitor that I have here with me today, which is my daughter.
Ingrid Johnson is Timba's mother. Timba was just 13 years old when she was drugged and sold into the world of sexual exploitation.
She was held against her will, she was beaten, she was thrown from moving cars, and our family was threatened.
After months of waiting, Timba finally made one phone call. That call eventually led to her rescue.
And it took hours, and I gave up many times.
Ingrid and her family are not alone. Across America, human trafficking is a hidden problem, one many don't realize exists. At a safe house in an undisclosed location in New York City, we met with survivors who were trapped in the world of modern-day slavery, now breaking the silence about the tactics predators use to target victims and the power of advocacy.
You learn about, like, your story, how to own it.
They are mothers, students, community members, and administrators, now leaders helping others transition out of what they call the life.
Like, I cried, I was homeless, I was raped, I was all these things before I got to like where I'm at now. I'm not telling you like, oh, when you leave everything is peachy, right? Like, you're gonna struggle, but it's so worth it.
This, the personal story Tiffany tells girls at a GEMS intake meeting, where Tiffany, Yolanda, and Adriana are all graduates. The program was started by Rachel Lloyd, a survivor from Great Britain. We joined them for dinner to talk about their survivor's journey.
And I feel like you come into it not even realizing that you're a victim, right? Because we went through, right, like we went through different like cycles of oppression and what it looks like to have a pimp and how to identify the fact that we had that that person is an exploiter.
But how is it that American children are lured by traffickers?
Trafficking doesn't always look like black eyes and violence.
Children and teenagers may still go to school, attend church, or even live at home while silently living a life of exploitation. Across the street from Queens County Criminal Court, prosecutor Jessica Melton is working through caseloads.
It's often psychological manipulation and control and fear they instill in victims.
She told us that many of the girls she works with are tricked into believing they'll be living a glamorous lifestyle. Predators also look for vulnerable children, young women, and men who have run away or have gone through the foster care system. Sister Ann Ostrich has dedicated her life to combating trafficking. She describes how a potential victim might be targeted.
They may say to a young woman, "Oh my, you have a beautiful smile." And if the young woman puts her eyes down and says, "Oh no, I'm not beautiful," she's vulnerable. They catch that right away.
Once a victim is coerced by a predator, then things change. Rules are enforced through violence and intimidation. IDs are taken. Traffickers even threaten to report victims to law enforcement to keep them in line.
They are about control, so they use force all the time.
Michael Osborn, who works with victims of human trafficking at the FBI, wants one thing to be clear.
Listen, let's understand. Kids and women who are involved in human trafficking are a commodity. And that's what these individuals do, is they sell the commodity. And they view this as an opportunity to resell something over and over on the same day.
That level of dehumanization has an impact.
And in her mind, she thought she couldn't go home until she was 18.
Much of this goes back to how society views and treats victims, something the women back at the GEMS Safe House hope to change.
Like, when anybody is like arrested for like a solicitation of sex, right? The person soliciting sex is the one who does the time, and the John got to like get this like class.
And though there have been major criminal justice reforms, many advocates say more needs to be done to protect victims and prosecute the predators.
Why do you think people still don't get it?
Because people make assumptions. And I feel like people think that they know what you're going through, or they know why you didn't leave.
Or they feel like because you're older, like that was something that you wanted to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say the like stigma of
it's
choice.
not like that's not it. Like just because I'm the age that I am now, that means I was like back then I was only 12 and 13. So how is that? So just.
Sitting with Ingrid, she explains how painful dealing with misconceptions were to her family.
I felt shame. I felt that no one would understand. And I really did think, because we were African Americans, people expected that we had some kind of horrible home, and that would be why they thought she was gone.
Tears of a mother's eternal love, bonded together with her daughter in a lifetime of healing. But as awareness of the problem continues to grow, a greater crisis is developing in the dark corners of the web: online child exploitation, something law enforcement is racing to eradicate. New York City has some of the most progressive laws to protect the exploited. Authorities tell us that the one important thing they want people to know is that no one is going to get arrested or charged or in trouble for reporting that they are a victim of trafficking, something predators try to mislead them into believing. Lydia?
And Tamara, these predators, they are choosing specific victims, right?
Yes, one thing that we learned was that these predators go after children in the foster care system and runaways. And authorities told us that it's commonly understood that if a runaway's been missing for more than 48 hours, that they've probably been scooped up by a predator. It's heartbreaking.
I just can't even imagine an 11-year-old, 12-year-old going through something like this. It's just
right here in our own backyard.
Tamara Lane, thank you so much for that powerful story. Next week, in part 3 of our special series, Human Trafficking Exposed, online child exploitation, predator pedophiles hunting for vulnerable young victims on the internet. That's next Thursday, right here on Currents News. And if you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking and needs help, it is out there. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888. That's 888-373-7888, that number right there on your screen, or you can visit their website, humantraffickinghotline.org. Still to come right here on Currents News, ahead of tomorrow's giant pro-life rally, Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is talking about the fight to save the unborn, and we'll tell you about the winners, school kids from the diocese who produced some very special artwork. More now on our lead story tonight, the March for Life. Early tomorrow morning, a delegation from the Brooklyn Diocese will set off for Washington to join in the fight for the unborn. Their shepherd, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio, sits down with Ed Wilkinson in this week's Into the Deep to talk about the massive event and the historic Supreme Court decision that started it all. Ed?
Thank you. Well, every January 22nd, we remember the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion here in the United States. And Bishop DiMarzio is here with us today to reflect on that. Bishop, every year we have this March for Life, and we remember that decision, which we certainly we're not in favor of. Do you think that the march is getting more publicity now? Because it's always been very little publicity about it. Now that President Trump is in the White House, he seems to draw more attention to pro-life issues. Do you think that there's more attention given to the march?
It's hard to judge. I don't think much more, though. You know, he has addressed them, as some presidents have, through taping, a taped message, etc. But the media will not play it up. Whatever happens, it's just going to be downplayed. The few protesters that are against it will be seen on the media, but the whole march itself, the tremendous amount of youth that are there, never is seen on the media. So it's something that they bury.
Yeah. Are there a lot of young people from our own diocese that go down there every year?
I think we have about 4 or 5 buses every year that will go down there. And again, there's an all-night vigil at the cathedral, not the cathedral, but the National Shrine of Immaculate Conception, the Basilica. And then the next day there's a youth mass in one of the arenas. And then they go to the march. So I mean, they really they travel and they stay awake, and you know, it's a sacrifice for them. But it's young people. Nobody forces them. They go on their own.
Yeah. Some people try to say that if you're against abortion, you're against women. This year, the theme of the march is pro-life is pro-woman.
Right.
Does that say something that's significant
Well,
to us?
exactly. And again, I was looking at some of the founders of the women's movement were anti-abortion because they felt that was the most degrading thing a woman could be subject to. So I think making this pro-woman and pro-life is very important. There's two lives at stake here, the life of the woman and the life of the child. And that when you respect the life of the woman, you will respect the life of the child. So I think that comes first, too.
You know, we always try to keep the anti-abortion movement in the context of a consistent ethic of life, so that it's one of the life issues. But when we say it's just one of the life issues, does that try to downplay the issue of abortion in our society?
Yeah, I think it's the preeminent life issue because if you haven't got life, what else matters? You know, all the other things are important. They are life issues, but if there's no life, the rest of it doesn't matter at all. So it's the preeminent. Life itself, at its beginning, creates all the other issues for the life movement.
There were some calls today for the Supreme Court to revisit the Roe versus Wade decision. Would you be in favor of that? Is that locked in and set in law as a precedent?
No, there are many other things the Supreme Court was wrong on in the past, on slavery. Remember that? You know, they were wrong on slavery. Wrong on abortion, especially because they found in the Constitution a right to abortion that wasn't there. That wasn't. They need a law to do that, and it was the easy way to try to say, oh, there's the right to privacy, and then that expands to a right to abortion. I think that's where the problem is. You know, the Supreme Court cannot legislate. They're supposed to interpret the law as it is. And that's part of what happened in Roe versus Wade. Some of the people who originally voted for it later, two of them, said they were wrong after this decision was made. So, I mean, it has to be looked at. It's not perfect. There's no human decision that's perfect that can't be revisited.
Okay, Bishop, thanks for your insights on that. And we'll throw it now back to you at the news desk.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. We are also sending our prayers and thanks to all of the pro-life supporters traveling down to Washington this weekend. And finally, tonight, the winners of the Tablets Art Contest have been announced. Students ranging from elementary school to high school were awarded last night for their masterpieces they submitted to the tablet under the theme, Keep Christ in Christmas, with more than 400 art entries from all over the diocese. Only 12 winners were picked, and I was there to congratulate them all, and it was wonderful to see all of that beautiful artwork. And also, before we go, a quick programming note. There will be no current news tomorrow night. Instead, Net TV will be airing something special at 7.
Just a priest who walks with his people.
The program, called Sunday to Sunday, follows a priest from the Brooklyn Diocese who's taking the pro-life movement to the streets of New York City. And again, that program will be airing tomorrow night instead of Current News. And that's Current News. I'm Lydia Serrani. Thank you so much for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time. Good night.